It's time for Remodel Revolution. And now, an award-winning contractor with over 40 years experience. Here is Alex Guthrie.
Welcome to another episode of Remodel Revolution. I'm your host, Alex Guthrie. We're coming to you from the world headquarters of Remodel Revolution, from deep in the heart of the great state of Texas, the beautiful city of Dallas, Texas, if you just really needed to know. Today we're going to have a fantastic show. I have got Michael Harris with Bryjo Roofing. We're going to roofing and construction, and we're going to talk some about roofing and some about remodeling and how he's dealing with a lot of this remediation business and that has come really for all of us after the Great Freeze. But first, we're going to visit with John Dupra with Revel Woods in upstate New York, who is stuck in his basement and felt the need to talk to another human being today. We'll be right back. Hang on. After the great freeze of actually the entire country, but what really hit us here in North Texas and in the Southwest, pipes were bursting everywhere, and the two main things that you lose is sheetrock and wood floors. And I've looked at several homes, and I've looked at many over the years that have had water damage after things like this occurred, and it could be a tornado, it could be busted pipes, whatever it is. But when water gets on that floor, you have to make some quick decisions. And then after you get to the point to where you're ready to replace it, if that's what you have to do, then you need to really make some tough decisions on what to replace it with. And my friend John Dupra, who is I guess, John, are you the president of Revel Woods?
I prefer acting CEO. Chief Evangelism Officer. You abbreviate that any way you want. I'm coming to you from my world headquarters, which is my house.
Your basement.
Not my parents' basement, though, so moving up.
It's not your parents' basement. Good boy.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm only 37. I'm young for moving out of my parents' house for my generation.
There's still time, brother. There's still time.
Might end up back in there. Who knows? It's been a weird year.
Well, we've had this. And you got it. I think it hit everybody, but down here and in the southwest part of the country and the southern part of the country, where we're not really equipped for these big sub-zero periods of time, and our plumbing just isn't made for it. We of course had just gazillions of pipes burst and a lot of people are, me included, we get a lot of calls from people begging contractors to come out and do something. One of the things that I talk to people about, of course, is their flooring, because that's one of the things that gets destroyed. And a lot of us now have, instead of traditional wood floors, we have an engineered wood floor or some type of alternate flooring that looks like wood. That may be some sort of composite with a vinyl coating on it. Whatever it was, it probably got ruined in the wood floor. So the big question comes up with all of these homeowners that are having to replace floors. What do I go back with that'll protect me when this happens again? What is your advice?
So it's a great question, and it was a obviously horrible what happened in the lower Midwest and the Southwest and Southeast, I guess. But I hope I was going to say I hope you enjoyed our Western New York winter sample pack. That's our biggest export at the moment, since people don't leave. But yeah, obviously, all joking aside, a lot of people were hurting in all different types of ways. So it's a great question, right? Whenever something happens and there's water damage, typically the floor is going to have to be replaced. And the first thought is, well, is there some product I can use that prevents this in the future? And the answer is maybe, but there's other things you have to consider with that. So I know our company, we specialize in wood flooring. We also have a couple lines of vinyl that, you almost have to have these days because it's so popular, but there's some misconceptions about that. So I think it's really important to kind of talk about what is right for your specific situation. Because we've had places, even before you had pipes burst, we have a lot of appliances leak. They don't make them like they used to, I guess. And so the houses would flood because, the appliance broke. And one of the things that they would say is I had wood in there, the wood warped. I want to replace it with something more waterproof, whether it's engineered wood flooring, which is more water resistant than solid wood flooring, or vinyl or some kind of resilient flooring. And the thing you have to worry about, though, with water damage is what's underneath that floor. So if you're right on top, floating on top of a concrete slab, you probably are okay with vinyl. If you've got some kind of wood subfloor or something in there that can hold that moisture, your floor, if you had a vinyl floor, for example, may not warp if you have a flood, but you could have a serious mold issue underneath that. So at some point, even if the floor isn't necessarily damaged, depending on your situation, you may still have to replace it. So my advice is really get what you want, because if you're in a situation where you're going to have to replace it anyway, unless you're anticipating this happening every year, there's a lot of time in between when you hopefully have to replace that again. So you should enjoy the space you live in.
A lot of these decisions are made when you're emotionally involved with it, right? You just went through this horrible ordeal. You wake up in the middle of the night and step out of bed, and you're stepping in 3 inches of cold water.
Yeah, no power and it's freezing out, right? I mean, that was a horrible experience you guys went through. You were not equipped for it, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Like, are you gonna set up Dallas, Texas, the way Rochester, New York is set up, because it might happen once every couple of years? Probably not. Maybe a little more winterized than it was, but your home's kind of the same thing. If you're thinking, well, I'm going to be ready for the next flood, and you get this thing that in between those floods you just hate and then ultimately have to replace anyway, that's not necessarily the wisest decision either. So it is important to take your circumstances into account, but also know, what are you really preventing against, and how likely is it that, again, I went with something that was more water resistant, but I had to throw it out anyway because I had mold, or I would.
So let's talk a little bit about the installation part of this. So if you have like an engineered wood floor and a slab foundation, a lot of people go in and they glue that wood floor down to that concrete.
Yes.
And of course, I've been railing against this for years because I think it's such a bad idea, and I've experienced having to replace it too many times. But if you had a engineered floor that was sealed on the bottom and you had a floating floor as opposed to having it glued down, do you think that there's any way some of that could be salvaged or may survive better?
I think so. Well, it'll be easier to replace. So if you have something that's floating and not glued, especially if it's the worst is when it's glued to gypcrete. That is, as any contractor will tell you, not their favorite thing to do. We'll say politely. So if it's glued there, it's you can remediate it, but it's impressive. If there's only a little bit of water damage and it's a floating floor, you can do several just board replacements. I mean, this is more common if a refrigerator leaks more than if, the pipe bursts and your whole house is underwater and you're looking at your neighbor out next door building an ark or whatever. But it is, you can always replace a section of a floor. And especially if you have some extra boxes after after you've put that floor in. Usually we recommend having a few extra boxes just in case you ever need to do a repair, or maybe it's not even because of water, right? Like somebody dragged something across the floor and it damaged 3 boards.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to replace an entire house worth of flooring because 3 boards got scratched.
Well, we always recommend that we leave a few extra boxes, and if when you're purchasing that engineered floor, a lot of times people will go out and they'll purchase the last, the stuff that's on sale. Never going to be, we're never going to run this one again. You can have it half price. You better get a few extra boxes for sure. I wanted to touch
God
on.
forbid you run short.
I wanted to run on solid wood. Talk about solid wood floors for a second.
Okay.
Now, solid wood floors, and let's say you have a pier and beam house, a traditional older home with pier and beam, and you have a solid wood floor. That floor is always going to have some cupping, seasonal. I call it seasonal cupping. So it does seasonal cupping when it's humid outside, or if you're running your air conditioner and you're introducing this cold, moist air into the house, and that wood does what wood does. It kind of cups. And then when it dries out, it goes back down. Now, our rule of thumb on these floors that have had water damage from my floor guy of many years is to wait 6 or 8 weeks before you replace them.
If the issue is cupping, yes. So wood is, especially solid wood, this doesn't happen as much with engineered wood because of the way it's engineered. A lot of people too get confused with terminology when they think there's solid hardwood, they think of as real hardwood, and then engineered is like some sort of weird sort of facsimile. That's not true. Engineered wood is considered real wood. It's just made slightly differently, and it is more resistant to moving. So a solid wood floor, right? You have like it's not a creative name. Each plank is a solid piece of wood. So it moves, right? Like a sponge. It absorbs moisture. It's hydroscopic, I believe is the proper term for that. I've learned from one of these books behind me.
I was wondering if you read any of those.
Yeah, I've read them all. So when seasons change, things like that, it will move. When it cups, the moisture content at the bottom of the wood is actually higher than the top of the wood, which is why that bottom part expands and then the top part shrinks, and that where you get a little bit of that cupping. That is the sort of thing that when the temperature or situation changes, it can change. So if it's not severely cupped, I would wait a little bit. And sometimes what people will do is they'll see it's cupped after like a bad winter or whatever, and before they let it do its thing and kind of level back out, they'll sand it so it's perfectly flat again. They'll get the floors refinished, and then what happens is you had the edges of the boards got thicker, right, than the center of the board, and you flattened it. Then when it goes back to what it was doing, it's going to be smaller. So then it goes to what's called crowning, where the middle is taller than the edges. So now you went and created a problem where you didn't have one before. So yeah, in that situation with solid wood floor, definitely get in between the recommended relative humidity, which is between 35 and 55%, and let the house sit there for a little bit and see what happens before you break something.
And one of the interesting things is the way we're building houses now. So where we have
they don't breathe.
They don't breathe. So we had when we were building all wood houses, we had slats underneath that wood floor that allowed air to get up under there, and everything was kind of controlled by the moisture level, and nobody ever thought about it. The floors would warp a little bit. They knew they'd go back down. Now we have plywood. They don't breathe. And so you have to either be really patient or do something else.
Right. And that's where engineered wood floor is just so you still get all the benefits of real wood, and then, there's some that have that top layer that are really thin. They can't be refinished necessarily, but there's many of them that can be refinished the exact same amount of times as a solid. So it does remove a lot of the disadvantages of the old school kind of engineered when it was like considered a cheaper alternative. Now it's actually more, in many ways, more expensive.
Well, and that's the
solid
advice that I give my clients when they're selecting engineered floor, is to look at the edge of the veneer and see and ask the salesperson, can this be refinished at least once?
Yeah, I'd say at least once. You know, at some point you can get a top layer so thick it becomes overkill, and you have a separate issue at that point, because anything really more than, once you get really north of 5 millimeters on that top layer, people kind of think like thicker is better, and that's not necessarily true. Thicker is more expensive, but anything between that 2 to 4 range is a sweet spot, because what happens, the thicker that top layer is, especially when it's a wider board, you've increased the amount of volume of that single piece of wood on that top layer. And so the more volume it is relative to the rest of the engineered plank, the more likely it is to move. It's going to command a lot more power. So what happens with some of these thicker top engineered floors, like sit 5 to 6 to 7, things like that, they actually, if the seasons change, they're going to still want to do the same thing that solid floor did. And if there's enough volume there that it's more powerful than what's holding it to the rest of that board, it can pull itself apart.
It can delaminate.
So you actually have a less stable situation.
Yes, and it'll crack. I've seen that. And you're right. You're absolutely right. So let's talk about vinyl as a replacement product. This comes up a lot with these slab houses, and my opinion of vinyl is high. I love it. I think that the work you guys have done to design a wood look with vinyl and a durable, basically lifetime floor is totally amazing, because I've watched it go through its changes in the 40 years I've been doing this, and it's pretty amazing where we started and where we are now, and I'm assuming it'll continue to get better. What are your thoughts and advice on vinyl wood type flooring?
Yeah, so vinyl is it has been the fastest growing category in flooring. From when you talk carpet, wood, tile, vinyl's been the fastest growing for the last, I don't know, decade probably. And then in 2020, it was actually projected to outsell wood for the first time. And I don't know if it ended up, I mean, that was before the pandemic, so I don't know if that ended up happening. I got to check my numbers on that. But the technology, that has been where the investment has been. Wood is still the aspirational product. When we've done the consumer research, that's why vinyl looks like wood, because that is what people want. So we've seen a little bit of a shift in consumer preferences since the pandemic, where they want that sort of authenticity. I don't know what it is. There's this subconscious thing where people are tired of being lied to or something, and they don't want the floor to lie to them either. You're not wood. So it's, but
I just dropped a frying pan on you. You can't be wood.
Yeah, exactly. But in terms of the technology, both from a visual as well as a performance standpoint, it really has improved a lot, and it's hard not to. And they're starting to produce it in the United States now too. One of our suppliers, now all of our WPC, which stands for wood polymer composite, comes out of Georgia, as opposed to it used to all come out of China. And that actually was spurred on in a lot of ways by the trade war to get around the tariffs. We started actually manufacturing in the United States. There were cost benefits to that whole saga, which we probably don't have time to get into. But one of the outcomes of that was you're seeing more U.S. produced vinyl. I mean, sheet vinyl has been produced in the U.S. for a long time, but some of these more, they call the vinyl industry for flooring, they say there's a lot of TLA, which is 3-letter acronyms. You've got LVT, LVP, WPC, SPC. I can name letters all day. Actually, it's one of my favorite things. But it is amazing when you see how much the technology how far it's come now. And now they're doing things with all kinds of crazy designs. And we actually have the ability with some of our interior design partners to customize certain vinyl looks in smaller runs.
Really?
So now you're not ordering 50,000 square feet from Taiwan after you've paid $55,000 for just the roll of film. And then you got to get a shipping container, which is another thing right now. So yeah, it's amazing how far that's come. And it's not even just the low end of the market. You're seeing the high end vinyl now cost as much as mid-level wood.
That's where I wanted to go was cost, because the vinyl products that I'm seeing are really high quality. I mean, the level of quality has changed so dramatically.
Yeah. So the issue, obviously you can't refinish vinyl. But you know, a lot of it, because it's so durable and it's resilient, it's the joke with vinyl is it doesn't wear out, it uglies out. You're going to be sick of it probably before it needs to be replaced, which is the same problem I
That's
have
what
with
my
tile,
wife said
actually.
recently.
Yeah.
I thought you would wear out by now.
Yeah, well, I think it said the same thing to me. Although I'm getting there after the last couple of years. It's been fun. I feel like I'm wearing out. But it has actually, I will say, business and I'm sure your business has seen the same thing. Just from the pandemic, our industry is surging right now because that's where everybody's spending their money, right? Americans spend their money on two things predominantly when they're not saving for retirement, which is most of the time, which is vacation in their homes. Right. And so now nobody's going on vacation.
No.
Hopefully that'll start changing pretty soon. But everybody's looking at their house going, well, what if I get locked in here again? So great time to be in home goods. Great time to be in a trade. Any trade, really, has been. I don't know anybody who's not slammed right now.
So are we having, let's talk about, for my last question for you, is accessibility to these products. So there's been a lot of drag on construction projects and contractors just getting product. How is that holding up in your industry?
Horribly. If I can be frank with you, we're friends. I can be honest with you. It's not great. It's really not great. And so with lumber, so vinyl lumber, two different issues. Most of the vinyl's imported, so that is subjected to a lot of the import issues, and this isn't just our industry. It's furniture. There's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, if you look right now, when this is being recorded, you can go to the Port of Los Angeles and look out over Long Beach, and it looks like we're being invaded. There's an armada of container ships that they can't get unloaded quick enough. To get a shipping container, one of our suppliers that buys from Cambodia, used to be from China, but the shipping container cost went from $2,000 to $10,000. If you get a shipping container, you got to get it onto a ship. Then if you get it on a ship, it's got to get to a port where it will be unloaded. I mean, they're sending ships from Asia down through the Panama Canal up to Atlanta, and they will be unloaded sooner than they would be if they just went to California.
Wow.
So that's the issue with imported goods. With domestic goods right now, and this is something we're really trying to help spread awareness of this, because it's just making everybody's life easier if the homeowners particularly understand that this is the situation right now. The lumber industry did not benefit from the trade war initially. It's kind of a complex story. I'll try to tell it quickly, but effectively what had happened was we went from a $3.7 billion trade surplus in 2017 to a deficit. And so our largest trading partner for North American hardwoods was China. So when that market went away pretty much overnight, it's about an 18-month forecast, the lumber producers were desperately worried there was going to be an oversaturation of the market because this surplus had to go somewhere. So then they were worried that was going to drive prices down through the basement, and then they wouldn't be able to profit. So they started scaling way back. And so I was part of a delegation that the Hardwood Federation sent to Congress in 2018 to talk about a number of issues, but this was one of them. So this was the big concern in 2018, was it's going to drive lumber prices down through the basement. It's going to devalue it, and these mills are going to start shutting down. So then as they scaled back production in order to help not oversupply the market, the pandemic happened 2 years later, which was nobody saw coming. At least in our industry, nobody saw it coming. And so then all of a sudden demand now surged through the roof, but lumber companies had scaled considerably back over the last 2 years. So they were sort of uniquely
kind of caught. They were kind of caught in a bear trap.
It was a perfect storm, really. I mean, it wasn't one person's fault or anything like that. It was just a series of circumstances that lined up perfectly to where now they had to shut down due to COVID. So they got behind on production because social distancing guidelines are not necessarily friendly to most factories. So they were running half the crews that they were so that they could keep the distancing guidelines. For a while, they had to shut down. I know my friend in Pennsylvania runs a mill in Western PA. She was saying they were shut down, considered non-essential, until somebody explained to the governor of Pennsylvania where toilet paper came from. It needs sawmills, so that's that they opened right back up. They're only down for like 2 days.
Send them a roll of vinyl toilet paper, and he'll get the message.
Never wears out.
Yeah, man, we really appreciate you taking time out for us today. We just ran out of time.
Hey, my pleasure.
I always enjoy talking to you, and we always learn so much. John Dupro with Revel Woods, and Somewhere upstate New York in some basement. Thank you so
again.
much, John. Have a great day, buddy.
You too, Alex. Thank you.
All right. Listen, if you are on social media, do not pass up this chance to find Remodel Revolution on Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, all of them. Check it out. Check out our podcast, Remodel Revolution, on any of your podcast sites. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got an incredibly interesting guest to introduce you to today. Imagine this, a totally customized, organized, and beautiful master closet. A home office that fits right into a perfect space. A pantry designed specifically for your storage needs. Imagine your home totally organized. It's time to call the design professionals at Closets by Design DFW and turn your dreams into a reality. With a design staff over 30 strong, Closets by Design works directly with you to create your dream space, and they build it locally, helping support the DFW community. Check them out at dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010. Use the promo code RRV to find out about the amazing specials and discounts available. That's dallas.closetsbydesign.com or call them at 972-361-0010, and don't forget that promo code RRV, Closets by Design. It's only a few short weeks until we'll be running our air conditioners all day and all night. Hey, it's time to get an HVAC tune-up scheduled. Call my friends at Total Air and Heat in Plano, Texas at 972-881-0020 right now and get on their schedule for a tune-up. Don't wait for the long lines. Get ahead of the crowd. Total Air has been servicing North Dallas and Plano and Richardson areas for over 60 years. Steve and Justin Lawton sell and service Carrier brand heating and cooling systems with Green Speed Intelligence technology. So give them a call at 972-881-0020 or contact them at totalair.com. It's only a few short weeks until we'll be If you live in the North Texas area, you understand how fast our seasons change. Just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago maybe, we had a massive winter storm that froze thousands of pipes and burst and did tons and tons of damage. And then today it's 80 degrees. So that's sort of how things go around here. It's also springtime when we're doing this show, and we are having front after front after front come through Tornado Alley and bring all kinds of weather, unpredictable weather. And I always love having a roofing contractor on. And today we have a double whammy. We've got a roofing contractor who's also a remodeler who's dealing with some of the damage from the freeze as well as the roofs. He's probably got roofs to replace from hail and things like that. I want to introduce you to Michael Harris. Michael owns Bryjo Roofing and Remodeling.
That's correct.
In where are you, in Plano?
We're in Plano now.
You're in Plano?
Yeah.
In North Dallas area. And welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah. So I don't know which one to start on first, but roofing is really the reason I called you to begin with. And then this other thing happened in the meantime after we had scheduled this.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about roofing and talk to our listeners about some of the decisions that they need to make when they suspect. Listen, when we had a 60-mile, we had a storm come through. We had a 60-mile-an-hour straight line wind hit us that lasted 5 or 10 minutes. And when I went outside, there were little pieces of shingles all over my driveway from the ridge that had just peeled off.
Yeah.
And so now we get to go do the roof thing.
Yeah.
And so this is not unusual, particularly with an older home.
Now, what I always tell people when they see shingles in a yard, it's not always your roof. The shingles are missing from.
Especially with a wind like that.
Yeah, we get phone calls where they've got shingles and they want us to come out and look at it. I had to tell them to walk out in the yard first, look back and make sure if it's missing from your roof, you'll have black spots on the roof. Mm-hmm. If it's not yours, it's your neighbor's. But we do get a lot of wind damage. A lot of the shingles, the 3-tab shingles, which is the thinnest one you can get, is rated around 70 miles an hour. They're getting a little better with them. But most of the laminated shingles, which is probably 90% of what you're seeing on roofs, aside from the custom shingles, they're a little bit more money.
So let's explain. I'm just going to stop you in the middle
Sure.
of that thought. Tell us what is the difference between a laminated shingle and the whatever the other is, solid shingle. What is the difference?
Well, you have laminated shingles, which basically is layers of composition, but it's got some felt in there and it's impregnated with asphalt, and then they put granules on top of it. So with that line of shingles, you have a standard composition. Then you can get a class 4. Now, class 4 can be in a composition shingle, or you could go up into a composite shingle, which, looks kind of like plastic, but you have shingles that can either be stone-coated steel. Those are nice to have. They're a little bit more pricey, obviously. They have a composite shingle that is got impact resistance. It's really good. They can handle freeze, hail, fire. It's not the same. But I recommend with people, when you know that you live in a hail-prone region, to start considering a class 4 shingle. It's an upgrade from your standard composition shingle, but you get a discount for it from your insurance carrier, so it's always a plus to be able to get a double benefit.
Plus, you sleep a little better at night this time of year.
Well, you don't have to replace your roof every time, nickel-size hail comes in or dime-size hail. Generally, these last up to 1.5 inch size, which is a golf ball size. So you have enough hail that comes thick, it can damage almost any kind of roof. You can have tile shingles that are broken. Those you can break just walking on them trying to repair them.
Exactly, yeah.
So you want to be careful of what you're buying. And plus, if you look at a heavier roof, the framing underneath that's different than if you just put a composition shingle.
So it's the whole system.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
And I'm glad you bring up system, because one of the problems we had when this ice storm came in is people were getting ice dams. They would go out there, it'd be sunny, and all of a sudden water's dripping in from the roof. Well, that ice was freezing up on the edge of the roof. The night before the ice froze, the next day the snow starts to melt when we had that 6 to 8 inches, our every 10-year snowstorm that we get, right? But those ice dams were developed on the edge, and the snow would melt, which would force the water backwards up under the shingles, and they were all leaking on the outside walls.
And so the point you're making is that shingle roofs are made for water to go down towards the edge of the roof. In other words, it's water goes downhill. And so you build the roof so that water can go downhill and not get inside. What Michael is talking about is the reverse happens with the ice dam. That can be in your valleys, it can be any number of places.
Flashings, yeah.
And it forces that water back up against the whatever's in the valley or the shingles, however.
Right.
And then it finds its way in.
Yeah, and when we talk about systems, they actually have products out there. We don't normally do it in this region, but you're hearing people talk about ice and water, and there's an ice and water shield that you can put in. Well, that ice and water shield is 3 feet wide. So that's your typical eave depth. Is usually about 24 inches, but when you go from the edge up to past the exterior wall, you've got the 3 feet. Now your 6-inch overlap that you had for your shingles is now increased to 18 inches in most places. So the ice damming doesn't occur. But those homes that did not have any of that, some contractors unfortunately don't even put valley material in the valleys.
I've noticed.
Yeah. And another mistake that's made is the installers cut them too short, where they fall just 6 inches shy of where they actually need to be. The water should continue over every piece of flashing. And some guys just don't know.
So if I'm a homeowner and I've hired somebody that I trust to do this, and let's just say they did a snow job on me, no pun intended. Well, pun intended. And they're not following these practices that you're talking about. What can I do, or is there someone I call? How do I find out whether they've done it right?
Well, it's kind of hard to stand out there and watch the installers and know for sure. And most lay people don't really know how it's done. They look up and they see a roof and the shingles look normal. They look flat.
Right.
From the ground, they look okay. The only time they call is if there's a little, what we call a fish mouth, that something's sticking up just a little bit. But, you can have guys come in and inspect it. We've gotten people to call us before, say, hey, can you just come do an inspection? Now, it's not every contractor's dream to go behind and check every contractor.
No.
And say, did you do it right? Because
No.
now you're, kind of waving your fist, going,
Right.
come on.
Right,
Why didn't you
right.
call us first? But, short of it is, you can look, there's actually online, you can look at installation manuals. Now, you don't want to be the guy standing out there, look up the installers going, hey, you're not doing this right.
I've got clients that'll do it.
Yeah, it happens.
It
Yeah.
happens, yeah.
I read this online. It's got to be true. Yeah. But with the guys, you want to know that there's actually somebody that is a project manager that knows the industry.
It sounds like what you're saying is hire a quality company
Yeah.
to begin with.
Yeah.
Now, you can always go, and it has always been the case, particularly in roofing, and go find certain people that will say, I'll do it half price. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it, man. Everything's covered.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that happen when it comes to hailstorms. You get a lot of guys who'll come knock on the door. That's just a marketing tool people will do. They'll come knock on the door and say, hey, we'll help you. It won't cost you a dime. That's risky because there's a reason that the things cost the way they cost. So when we talk about ice and water shield, we talk about in the valleys, we talk on the edges, we talk about quality products, we talk about underlayment, plywood repairs. We want to have a good moisture barrier that's on that roof as well. And sometimes we'll find that the same old felt is there and it'll have new shingles and old pipes and the same old drip edge.
With a lot of black tar around them.
Yeah, that's happened before too. I always say if you put black tar on the repair, it's going to cost you more to fix it because you got to scrape it all back off.
How many layers of shingles? Let's say I have damage and I call a roofer, and the roofer says, man, we'll just go on top of that old layer. It's fine. Don't worry about that.
18 layers is fine. No, it's not.
You've only got 5 layers, man. There's room for one more.
Sorry, the framing's still fine. If it starts bowing, then you got a problem. No, we try to just limit it to one. I haven't put 2 layers on a roof in, I know, 20 years. And it's just, you add a lot of stress onto that home. You don't realize that, a typical weight of a shingle, let's say a bundle, or not a bundle.
What's
but
a
let's say-
bundle? What does a bundle weigh?
Well,
80
on a
pounds?
3 tab, you got 70 pounds.
70
okay,
pounds.
and there's 3 bundles to a square. So you got 210 pounds of
Square is, and how much is a square? It's 100 square feet.
Yeah, that's right. It's 10 by 10 area. So, and that's how we measure them. That's how we look. That's how we do hail assessments. We do what's called a test square. If you've got so many hits in a 10 by 10 area, then we know, okay, then it needs to be replaced. Sometimes you got 1 or 2 and you say, let's wait for a bigger storm. It's just better. Mine is I'd rather save my money and wait for some real damage. And then there's some people don't do it and we're waving the flag saying, please, you need it, whether you use us or not. You need to do this. But to answer your question straight up, you can put up to 2, but if it's a laminate shingle, you cannot lay over a laminate shingle because there's too many pits in it, and the manufacturers will not warranty those shingles.
Oh, so we're getting into a manufacturer thing
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well as an insurance thing, because they're only going to pay to remove so much.
Right.
Right.
Well, let's say you've had a hail claim and they paid to replace the shingles and they were going to take off the old layer. If you don't take the old layer off, and then let's say you get a hailstorm 2 years later, which if we've lived in Texas long enough, you've had it. You can't come back and have them pay for a second layer that they paid for last time. So I recommend if they're paying you to remove it, remove it. That way you can expose the decking that's there and know for sure if you need other repairs.
Let's talk about decking,
Yeah.
because there's options in decking. What are some of the options, and how would you advise people to kind of assess, something that's not just an upsell from somebody,
Sure.
something that makes sense?
Well, on a lot of homes, if we're doing what we call a redeck, that's where we're going to take off, either if it's old wood shingles or we're going to take off the plywood. What we recommend, if we can take off that layer, we go back with a radiant barrier, and that's foil on one side. That helps you with the energy in the house. But you want to start it at 1/2 inch. There are some decks out there that are 3/8. I've walked across a roof carrying a bundle of shingles. You walk between 24-inch on center rafters with a bundle of shingles, and especially near the ridge, you're going to find the attic real quick.
Yeah.
And so now they've shifted things up to 1/2 inch, which in standards is 7/16.
Mm-hmm.
But I recommend radiant barrier if it's possible. Some people don't like that. Word is on the street that sometimes the cell phones don't work well in your house if you have radiant barrier decking.
Well, it gets blamed for that a lot.
Yeah,
And and it makes sense. I mean, it's a foil. It's like wearing a tinfoil hat.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
On your house. However, the benefits generally outweigh that, and I think now the technology, you can there's a workaround for that.
Yeah.
If you want to spend the money. So we have radiant barrier, which of course I love radiant barrier. I always have. I think it is real beneficial to a house that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
And then the OSB. Now let's talk dollars.
Oriented strand board.
Let's talk some dollars here. So the common, or really the go-to material for roof decking is oriented strand board, or OSB.
Right.
Which is, when you look at it, it looks like little layers of wood all kind of glued together. Okay. That used to be
shavings from the 2x4s they built. Yeah.
cost-wise, used to be $7 a sheet, $5 a sheet.
That was like the 10-cent Coca-Cola. Yeah, we're not going to see that anymore. Yeah, they're pushing upwards of $30 a sheet right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time I bought one at the new price at $27, I thought they rang me up wrong. I said, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't buy 5 sheets. I only one. Yeah,
and she said, I'm sorry, I'll walk you back over and show you. And it was a shocker.
Yeah.
But we generally don't get those kind of price increases unless a hurricane's coming. Mm-hmm. But because the demand that we have for the product, the factories that don't have all the same workers in them right now because of COVID has really changed how quickly we can get product.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a drag on the whole industry right now because of accessibility to products. I wanted to talk about storm damage and remodeling. I hope you'll come back and let's talk about the remediation work you're doing and the remodeling work you're doing. Yeah. We've run out of time today. Can you believe it already? I really appreciate your advice, and hopefully soon we can do a remodel show. That'd be fun as well.
Yeah.
Michael Harris with Bryjo Roofing has been our guest. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll close out the show. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us, make happy faces, anything you can do to make us feel great on all of your social media, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest. We're there. Also, check us out on Texas Weather Tracker TV, Saturdays at 1 and 3. We're on Apple, Roku, Amazon, and other TV stations. It's been a great show today. Thanks for watching. I'm Alex Guthrie. Until next week, have a good week.
The views and opinions of this program are for educational and entertainment purposes only and are not intended to replace the recommendations of a hired professional. You can catch Remodel Revolution anytime. Follow the show on the website, remodelrevolutionradio.com, or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, using the handle @Remodel Revolution Radio. You can always listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn, and watch the show anytime on YouTube.